Greetings, everyone. Oh, so good of you to come around today. I hope you've had a good morning and you've gone really deep into this biophilic experience. Now we're just about to go even deeper because we're going to bring it closer home. Yes, and first of all, I would like to introduce myself. And once again, as you've heard, I'm Githaka Karori, and I am nature. Anything you might think about nature, that's what I am. Nature as a regenerative experience. So regenerative agriculture, regenerative building, regenerative social interactions, regenerative everything. From here, I'm going to introduce my panelists. So it's a very eminent set of panelists. Starting from my right here is Samuel Thuo, also known as St. Jose. Samuel Thuo is an architect, the census architect. And his organization is the Census Architect, G Architect, graduate architect. Samuel Thuo is an advocate for health, well-being, and neurodiversity, inclusive design. Samuel brings a thoughtful and inclusive approach to architecture, centering sensory experiences and human well-being. We are honored to have his voice here today. Karibu sana, Kaka Thuo. And our next panelist is Kai Njeri herself. Njeri is a regenerative systems thinker and designer. She is many things all at once. She's a grower, a gardener, designer, teacher, poet, healer, doula, campaigner, and facilitator. In her own words, she is a regenerative systems thinker and designer. As far as we can tell, she is a force of nature. She is based in Tanga, Tanzania, and where she is tirelessly bettering lives through improved nature connection, food sovereignty, sexual and reproductive health, and by tackling gender issues. But at the heart of her work is nature as a source of physical and mental health, but also as a teacher whose principles and systems can inspire the way we organize and relate to each other and live our lives. Give it up for Kai and Thuo, please. Karibuni sana, karibuni sana. Now, our topic for this panel is to explore how sensory experiences, natural cycles, indigenous knowledge, and sacred traditions can be inspiration for our built environments. Before I take you to our panelists, we're going to have this discussion. It's a 1-hour session. And then at the end of session, we'll have about 10 minutes for your participation through questions. And I really, really encourage you to be an active part of this conversation, if you will. Thank you. Now, let's start our panel questioning. And we start off with Kai. Kai, tell us a bit about your understanding of sacred space, and maybe give us part of your lived experiences around that.
Yeah, you can hear me. So, sacred space, I really think when it comes down to it, it comes to the quality of presence you come into a space with. Because if we were to be shown a time lapse of where we are right now from 10,000 years ago, we just get a time lapse up to now. Different communities, different people, different animals, different plants have interacted with this space in very different ways. I bet you at some point in that timeline, there was a group of people or animals or plants that did what we consider in today's understanding worship, some form of ritual in this space. I can bet you. And so for that reason, I think it really does come down to the quality of presence we show up in a space with. That determines what we are noticing about ourselves, what we're noticing about the space we occupy, and how those two, the internal awareness and the external space, are interacting with each other. And if that's not what sacredness is, I don't know what it is. Because that means we catch as much as our senses can offer. And then from that point, now speaking as someone who does design as well, it is that kind of awareness that I bring into my practice. Because what I see, what I catch, what my senses can detect, then determines how I want to guide the flow of light, how I want to guide the flow of movement through a space. If that's not sacredness, if design is not ritual, if how we occupy space is not ritual, I don't know.
Oh, thank you, Kai. And let's carry on with Kaka Thuo. Tell us a little bit about the body as a sensing tool for sacred space.
Good afternoon, everyone. That's a very deep question for an architect. It should be directed to a neuroscientist. But I'll do my best to try to answer it from an architectural point of view. I think what Kai has said, that how we design spaces so that the senses can get to catch the various sensory stimuli. And I'd like us to engage us in a small activity. You can take a deep breath. Close your eyes if you're comfortable with that, and ask yourself, what smells are in this space? What scents can you detect? What sounds or noises you can listen to? Listen to the sounds in this space and how they make you feel. Ultimately, how does that make you feel? Does it make you feel safe, relaxed, comfortable? That's the role of the body. Thank you for that. There's a famous architect called Johanni Palasma, and he says that architecture is the reconciliation between our bodies and our environment. And that reconciliation, that mediation, happens through our senses. And so some theorists have argued, even in kindergarten we were taught we have 5 senses. Some architects have argued that we have 7 senses, others 33, 21. And so the role of design is to create sensory stimuli that, so that our bodies can connect with nature, with the built environment. Maybe I can stop it there for now. We'll continue with that thought in the next few questions.
Thank you, Kakathuo. Now, Kai, the womb as the original architectural design.
So to give you some background, he mentioned that I'm a doula. I work with birth a lot. Just a few days ago, I think last week, I probably saw way more placentas than most of us have seen in their lives. And it's a space that I love to work in for many, many reasons. But it's a space that has really contributed to my design mind. I think the womb truly is our first home. As we acquire these forms, we're incubated in that space. And it's in that space that we begin to acquire the first inklings of senses. Our nerves begin to develop. And then once we cross the threshold and we're now outside, they start to get put into use. But you think about, and just to mention that this was how I got connected to Sanjay's. He wrote an article, and I read his article, and I had to connect with you because that article really went into the design aspect of the womb and pregnancy. But then now, moving beyond that, just a little. So you look at the way light travels, you look at sound. They tell you when you're pregnant and your partner is pregnant, speak to the baby. They begin to recognize your voice. And I've seen this because I've been in many delivery rooms and spaces, home births as well. And I see the way, just the other day, I helped deliver twins in a home birth. And so something very interesting happened. One of the twins will not be picked up by mom. They will cry till they will not be picked up by mom. The only person they want to be picked up by is dad, and he will not even have to pick them up. The moment he walks into the room and starts to speak, Gabriel goes quiet. And you can tell already there was a connection that had started to happen when, in utero, sound was permeating, and so that's already getting picked up by our senses. But in a way that is pleasant to our senses, in a way that's not invasive. So I think about the buildings that we're designing today. The number of times I walk into a room and I'm not being loud, but you can hear the echo. It's very uncomfortable. You think of light. You walk into a room, and I will especially speak of birthing spaces. You walk into most birthing spaces in our hospitals, the light is sharp. It's very unpleasant. And then you look at the science of that, oxytocin will not go up, and that's what we need for labor, that's what we need for birth to happen. It shoots oxytocin down. So you look at the way our senses work with our body for us to thrive in this earth environment, and we're not building to optimize for our senses. We're truly, in essence, all the squares we are living in, the first thing we know is a curve of our mother's body, in utero and also outside. That's the first thing we experience. But then we've made our built environment very rigid, and we sort of have to force our curves into straight lines to fit into it. And so who are we building for? If our natural way of being, if the way we come into form is with curves, with light that's soft, with ways of listening that's pleasant to the ear, when we're building sharp corners, when we're building spaces where sound travels in very, I don't even know what the word is, but maybe Sanjay will help me here. But when we're building like that, who are we building for? This is very unusual. It's a strange way to be building for creatures that are made for softness.
Thank you so much, Kai. Yes, now, Kaka Thuo, tell us do we design for presence, not just function? How can nature guide us in awakening the senses? You know?
Thank you. I feel like Kai has gone on a roll and set us such a fantastic background for me to go on a roll criticizing the architectural community. Because in actual sense, the answer to the first question, how can we design for presence and not just function, is in the second part of that question, that nature should guide us in reawakening the senses so that we can design for presence. Coming from an architectural background, there's always an endless debate in the architectural community on whether form follows function or function follows form. So the camp that believes in form, usually they will create the form of the building and then they will fit in the function. And that leads us to buildings that are designed to please the eye. And then we have pleasing the eye and forgetting that we have other senses. We have the sense of touch, we have the sense of hearing and smelling, what Kai was talking about. The other camp that believes in function now comes up with a function, designs that, and then wraps up the function in a box, which leaves us with buildings that look like each other. So you have hospitals that look like shopping malls. You have homes that look like shopping malls. If you know, you know. You have you have schools that look like hospitals, and let me just go on a roll. We have these typical plans for like the TVET institutions in this country. So you go to Turkana, the TVET there looks like a TVET in Kisumu. Yet the climate is very different, and even the people there. And so we have forgotten that we as humans, the way we connect with buildings, it's through the senses. And through the senses, we can generate feelings and emotional connection with these spaces. I'll try to define presence, because the question was, how can we design for presence and not just function? For me, presence is the small activity that we did, where we were trying to breathe and smell the scents in this space. We were trying to listen to the sounds in this space. Because it's through these sounds and through those smells that we create a connection with a space. Have you ever had someone say that this space smells like my grandmother's house? Or this space smells like a toilet? It's because smells, they have a direct connection with the part of brain that is in charge of memories and emotions. When I was growing up, so I learned to cook lunch, and so my mom would leave me at home and tell me, when it's lunchtime, cook for your siblings. And we got into a conflict because I'll cook either too early or too late. So what my mom did, she got a container, put it next to the fence, and she told me, once the shadow of the fence hits the container, it's lunchtime. So at that point, I didn't process that until I got into architecture school, and I learned how to design with light and shadow. And so when we design for presence, we are creating connections with not just the spaces we are living in, but we're creating connections with nature, with something greater than ourselves. And it's only when we create those connections that we'll feel present. And there's Watetu. She was talking in the morning about life in the village. And the fascinating thing about life in the village, you feel present, not because it is scheduled, but because of nature that gets to surround you. You will know it's evening, it's nightfall, when the frogs and the crickets, they take over. Or when the cows come home from grazing. You know it's morning when there's those fantastic sunrise. You know it is the rainy season when the smell of the soil. It's this, the captivation of the senses connects us and creates that presence. And if we have presence, we must have absence. I felt absence when I came to the city, like Watetu was rather complaining in the morning, which is quite true, because in the city, I'll wake up and you're surprised it had rained last night. And that was the disconnection that you usually have in the city. For the second part of the question, where you were talking about how can we learn from nature to reawaken the senses, personally, I believe that nature, and that's the reason why we're here, is the best multisensory design. In terms that nature captivates all our senses in a holistic and balanced manner that architects designing buildings, they are failed to replicate. We are focused on the eye, we're forgetting to design for the other senses through use of like natural materials. Because the good thing about natural materials, other than conserving the environment and the climate change, they age in a manner that tells us time. You see a stone and you can say, this stone was not brought here yesterday. It's been here for, like I was saying, like the past 10,000 years. That kind of gives you some sort of presence. That's the good thing about natural materials. And now incorporating nature, because nature has the sounds of birds, the smells of flowers and plants. You've got the texture of these natural materials, such that I was looking at Githaka's glass outside there, and it invites you to touch. And this is inherent nature in us. You go to a museum and they will give you instructions that, please don't touch. The reason they're telling you is because it's inherent in you to want to touch. And so it's upon us as architects and designers to go back and design for the senses. Because when we do that, we are not going to greenwash around. And for us as people who are being designed for, it's upon us to resensitize ourselves. Once we come to the city, the life is too busy, we forget to resensitize and awaken our senses. It's upon us to walk barefoot. If your floor finish in your house is timber, I don't see any reason why you should. It grounds you. It's upon us to engage our senses, going for nature walks. Let's re-engage our senses as designers. Let's design for the senses, because once we do that, we actually design for presence.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's interesting what you just said, even about African times and how people, judge their time and activities according to what is happening in nature. Thank you very much for that. Now, Kai, talking of nature and natural rhythms, how can ritual rhythm and cycles act as inspiration for architecture?
As you were speaking, Sanjay, I just realized there's a pattern that this rigid, harsh architecture we're describing. It might be a response to something in an evolutionary response to something, because for the longest time, hunting, gathering, living in caves. And I mean, I could be absolutely wrong on this, so I'd rather not be quoted, but I could also be right. And I think that we got to a point where, after existing so long, feeling no sense of control over our environment. The only thing we could do with rain is hide from it. The only thing, and we've slowly evolved into a point where now we feel like we're in control. So what do? Now we can control how much we're touched by the environmental factors. It's really, really hot where I live. It's hot and humid. just about all the time. So as soon as I can, I want to be somewhere a little cooler. And now we're at a point where we can control, we can control these things. And so we build to control. We build, I believe, from an evolutionary state of fear. Because we came from a place of being so without that control that when we arrived to, oh, wait, we can make fire. Okay, what else can we do? So how can we control the elements? And then we started to construct in a way that was, like a feast in the air to the gods of, oh, you thought you can finish us with the storms. Look, we can make roofs. And I think now thinking about that, I wonder, if we're not building from that place of throwing a fist, at the gods and that response to fear, and then wanting to control our environment, if we're building from a place of, okay, the first membrane we experience is the uterine membrane, and then, we acquire all the layers of membrane that make up our skin, and then I would imagine that the very first time we constructed something, we imagined it to be the next membrane outside of our body that then protects us, because this membrane protects us from bacteria, unwanted bacteria getting into our body. It does serve a purpose. So then the next membrane, becoming our lived environment, protects us from this and that, contains our aspirations and our expressions within a space that we come to call our own. So if we think of it as a membrane, our bodies have cycles. The womb has cycles. If we are then extending that awareness, that knowledge into our lived environment, our built environment, then we cannot not be aware of the cycles within which we exist. We have to be aware of the cycles of time, the cycles of productivity, the cycles of birth and rebirth, death, as Roberta was talking about earlier. And when we're aware of that, then we're constructing for that. We're designing, developing our next membrane of our built environment from that awareness. And then that means we have to honor this knowledge. We have to honor these factors. Because otherwise, as was said before, we're building lived spaces that do not decay well, that do not then contribute to these same cycles that we are part of, that we contribute to, that we are bound to by our mere existence on this planet. So how do we study, and again, not from a place of fear and that reactionary, oh, I can control this now, but from a place of, these cycles are here, they come with the planet that we landed on. Okay, so how do we build in a way that honors our ability to live in these spaces, honors the kind of ancestry we then are, and how we contribute to this planet. And also, I think, is an expression of our curiosity and our creative capacity beyond expressing might. I think we've expressed enough might, in terms of our built environment. We've expressed enough of that, power of, I can do this, I can revolt against the environmental factors. So what if we say, okay, sawa, this time of the year it rains, it gets hot, it gets cold, it gets, all of these things, it's all of these cycles. How do we build in collaboration with them as opposed to in fight against them? And so when I think of building for and with our, natural cycles, all the ones that I've named and others that I haven't, those are the questions that I ask. What does it look like to be in collaboration, to be in honoring of those cycles as opposed to expressing might and power over them?
Can I support that?
Oh, yeah, please.
Wow, I think that's very powerful, because I strongly believe that what you have said, that we have been designing ourselves and shielding ourselves away from the natural cycles and just the rhythm of nature around us. So when I was growing up, one of the most best memories of presence was when it was about to rain. Because in the village, our house was like where we live, it's surrounded by hills. And so when it was about to rain, we'll go outside and we'll see the rain coming from like from the hills. We'll see it coming, the white, you see it coming. At first we're just seeing it, and then you start hearing the sound, and then it hits the iron sheets. And then you're like, poof. So for a moment you just feel the presence. And it happened the other day in the city. It was about to rain. I went to the rooftop to unhang the clothes, and all of a sudden I heard those sounds of rain coming. You know, in the city you don't see the rain coming. You just feel it rain. Boom, it has rained. And so the challenge with, like she was saying, the challenge with the modern architecture is we've really designed ourselves away from the rhythms of nature. And it's time we incorporated those natural rhythms into our living systems. The urban environments, everywhere you go, it's cabro, there is no grass. You are never connected to the smell of soil. You are not seeing even the ants coming out of this the soil when it's the rainy season. So I feel like it's about time we incorporate those things into our living systems through like the natural materials, creating systems that we can know when it's raining. We are not sealing ourselves in these boxes from the natural systems. Because once we are the moment we feel connected to nature, I think we start living, like she was saying in the morning, the cortisol levels, they go down. Our levels of productivity, they go up. Our levels of creativity, they go up. Our immune levels, they go up. But once we are living in these boxes, that's why we need all these medicines. We need the AC. Why do you need AC in Africa? Thank you.
I'd like to add something to that, because you can't talk about rain and not talk about the smell of rain. You know, it's it's one of those little, depending on who you're talking to, it's one of those little sensorial pleasures that we get. Just the smell of rain, petrichor, it's such a beautiful thing. And we've built our environment so that, I mean, you're in your office, it starts to rain, and then we're all panicking. Tuko kwa jam for sijui how long. And if, I mean, like you're saying, if you've watched rain come towards you, anything you needed to do in preparation so that by the time it's hitting you, you've done by the time it's arriving at your door. You know, you started by seeing the change of, the clouds kule juu. You've seen that it's now moving closer, it's getting hazier. You know, by the time, and then the smell of rain. By the time it's arriving at your door, if you had things outside that needed to come inside, they're inside. If you had things inside that needed to go outside, they're now outside. If you've been able to take care of yourself. But then the way we're building now, hiya, it's raining. I was supposed to go home at this time. Now we're all stuck in traffic for 3 hours. You know, there's something that I really have a lot of appreciation for human genius. But at times I think about human genius and I'm like, we think too highly of ourselves.
All right, you've heard that. Now I'll come back to you, Thuo. Now that we have talked about, nature and nature cycles, what lessons does nature and indigenous knowledge hold for sensory experience?
I don't know what to say because I feel like that's what we have actually been discussing. But maybe what I can say is that I think for designers, for architects, like she's saying, I think sometimes we overrate ourselves. I think it's time to be humble. It's time to be humble and accept that God is the ultimate designer. And it's time to start learning from nature, from the inherent experiences that we humans crave for. I don't know if I can give an example, but I'll say that when we were talking about memory, that the reason we desire the sounds of nature is not because we've just started existing the other day. It's because these are experiences and memories that are subconsciously coded in our DNA and our memories. And so, if we are designing for humans, if we are designing for people, the best thing we can do is we need to study people. We need to understand what do people need. And we have the marking scheme, and that's nature. So it's not like it's a lot of work. It's just accepting that this is what humans want. They want those sensory experiences. They want to be connected with their buildings. They want to be connected with their places. How are we going to give them that? I really liked it when Victor in the morning was talking about giving people curves. And Kai here talks about that from the moment you are not even born, the first thing you are used to is the curve. Why do you want to give people a straight line? And the challenge with architects, other industries that deal with design are already embracing this kind of knowledge. The place where it's lagging, it's in the architecture industry. If you have an iPhone, you really get, in its icons, you really get straight things. Because Apple, they have one of the best designers. It's because once we have those curves, those soft things, those organic features, subconsciously, you are not in control. Subconsciously, you are attracted to it. So it's for designers and architects to be humble.
And I'd like to add that you've talked about designing for what humanity wants. I think it's actually what we need. I mean, you think about the pandemic and we were all stuck in our boxes. Do I need to say anything else? Okay, go on.
Thank you. Maybe beyond that, you can mention a little bit about, your experience working with a birth center project, the birth center project, and what lessons from what we are discussing that you're applying to all of that, and what you're learning as you go along.
So I'm in the early stages of developing, I call it's a birth center, but I call it the birth forest, because it's going to be a birth center, birthing space, embedded inside a food and medicine forest, which I think brings together my favorite worlds. And so what I'm thinking about, the questions that I'm currently, because I've said, it's early stages. And thinking about design, I think about, I'm really looking at the womb for inspiration, but beyond inspiration for just answers to the question of, in this is one of the most vulnerable times, both vulnerable and powerful times that a human being can go through, a woman can go through. And so how do we make it so that it's safe? How do we make it so that at a primal level, beyond the catharsis and we sit and talk, no. Primal level. You watch animals give birth in nature, look at where they go to give birth. It's usually going to be semi-lit. If they know nothing's coming for them there. And the way the architecture of our body is, a lion starts to approach an antelope as it's giving birth, it swallows the baby back up. Our architecture is that impressive. So, but it tells you about how important safety is. So if we're thinking of constructing a space for birth, then looking at how the womb operates, the architectural design, the intelligent design of it, then guides. We need, at that time as we are experiencing contractions, you need to be walking, you need to be able to crouch, you need to be able to, if you can walk through a space that has plants that just, invite your senses into more calm. If the way the light travels through the silhouettes and the shapes and the bends of the space, then even further rests your system and increases the level of oxytocin in your system, then we'll have more births where the people coming into this world are interested in being in this world in a way that is about thriving, not just surviving. So gosh, that could be a whole day of this, but there's a lot of questions I'm asking, and truly taking lessons from birth itself. You look at the connection between the placenta and the baby, and there's several cords inside there. One that takes in the food and the nutrients required, one that takes out the waste. And they run so efficiently that you almost, unless someone tells you this is the one that does this thing, you look at it and you couldn't tell what it is. And the lines are so direct between how we receive nutrition and how we take care of our waste. It's a very efficient system, our body, when it's given what it needs. So how can we then build a space for birth, for social interaction, for thrive, for nutrition in a way that provides a direct line, for nutrition, a direct line for waste disposal, that feels safe to be in, that feels good to be in, a space that you want to actually exist in. What does that look like? What materials are we using? I'm very interested in Super Adobe. Now learning about microtile and building with mushrooms, I'm really curious. Rammed earth. There's so much possibility because these are the textures we know. As a child playing in your early between 0 and 5, it's the amount of soil we've eaten. That's like one of the first textures we come to learn. The plants around us, wood. So how do we bring that back? How do we return our memory to that place of safety and open, abundant curiosity that allows us to then step safely into our bodies? Because the moment we step safely into our bodies, then we realize just how much capacity our bodies have and how powerful our bodies are. And so imagining that as the first experience a human being has as they land on this planet, just what that could do for the brain, what that could do for development, I think there's a real question there, and I'm curious to explore the answers and hold hands with people who hold similar curiosities and see what's possible. Track the children that were born in this space. Just see what their IQ looks like. I think there's something there. So, but it's a let's see.
Thank you so much, Kai. Very profound, and thank you for the work that you're doing. Before I get to the last question, which is for you, Kaka Thuo, I'd be also very much interested to know part of the work you're doing around designing around senses.
Thank you. So, for me at the moment, I'm more into research. I like to call myself the senses architect, and humbly so, because the more I'm researching about this field, the more I get to learn how much I don't know. So my work currently lies more in research, just how senses impact our connection with buildings, our memory with places that we exist in, and how we can recreate sensory experiences that nature offers us. So I haven't had the opportunity to do like a real project other than my final year project, which was a museum of senses. I was designing a museum which would cater for all the senses. We are used to museums that are very single sensory oriented. You go there, you are told, don't touch, don't eat, speak, whisper, don't speak too loudly, keeping us in this, like muting us. And so I was trying to create a museum that could allow people to express themselves in their full capacity, so that they get to enjoy fully memorable and experiential environment. So my work currently lies in research and I'm also trying to advocate for this because I believe it is the key to creating healthier and happier environments, and I'm very proud of the team that has organized this conference.
Thank you very much. And now this will be our last question to wind this up. We've come all the way from the warm experience. We've spoken about some of the issues that architecture is facing right about now. And we've spoken about some of the things that we need to consider as we go ahead in terms of creating healthy environments. Now, Kaka Thuo, speak to us just a little bit about, our current state of, especially in urban areas, the deprivation of the senses, and contrast that with where we need to be or where we need to go after this.
Thank you. During lunchtime, I was speaking to a friend. I was telling her that it's very unfortunate that we all know the affordable housing project that's being done. And I was telling her that there's an unchallenge from the youth, and the unchallenge and the passivity is worrying because it's we, the young people, who are going to raise our families in those houses. And the way they are being done, I'm not sure it's the best way. So anyway, that's a different matter. But we're talking about environment, urban environment, and it's important we talk about that. So when we talk about urban environments, so there are two types of environments majorly. We have the natural environment and we have the built environment. The built environment is what designers and architects and urban planners create for us. From my perspective of sensory experiences and sensory deprivation, the natural environment, as we have said here since morning, offers us what I like to call a balanced sensory diet. We all know a balanced diet. So natural environment offers us a balanced sensory diet. You have sight, you see the rays of sun through the trees or been designed for, through the trees in a forest. We get to experience the sounds of wind, breeze, birds, frogs, crickets, smells of plants, flowers, and everything. We get to, and funny enough, regarding that light thing and sunlight, sun is never the same color from morning to evening. It keeps changing every hour. There's a variety. So that's the natural environment. It offers us a balanced diet. What does the built environment offer us? It's the sensory deprivation. I like to humbly say it's a nonsense experience, nonsense environment, because it's depriving us, it is starving us of these senses. You get into an office from morning to evening, you have artificial light, which is the same color, while on the other side, the reason the sun changes the color from morning to evening is because so that towards the evening, the color of the sun starts to release a hormone that induces sleep. It's preparing you to sleep. But the blue light in your office, it's not preparing you to sleep. And so that's how the urban environment is depriving us of the senses. And the natural, so the built environment is giving us an unbalanced diet. It is giving us an excess of sight and sometimes sound, and doing much more of, just eliminate the noise. And there's a lot of noise. Let's get of that. There are bad smells. Get rid of that. We're just getting rid of bad smells, noise, but we are not designing for that. And that's the challenge for designers and also people to get to experiment with that.
Oh, thank you very much, Thuo. Thank you, Kai. Now over to you.
Wait,
Oh,
before we over to them.
okay.
I'd like to take you into a space
Right.
for a little bit. It'll be just a few minutes. And so imagine you walk into a space, it's a dome. It's built with earth. And so the sound in there, I'd imagine most of us have been, in a madhouse. So we have a sense of how sound travels in that space. It's, even when you're loud, the decibels are there, but it lacks the harshness. So imagine yourself, you walk into this space, you close the door behind you, and so it's closed. It's an upside down bowl, right? And then you're standing at the center, and you start to hum. Hum. You can feel the way already. If you try, just try humming kidogo without like a deep. Just do it and tell me how it feels. Just do it. Just go. Mm. Can you feel the reverberation within your body? It's up here, but you can feel it in your chest and in your belly, right? So if you were to look at the skeletal structure of our bodies, so you have the head. Down here, it's almost like a cave, right? Then you travel down the belly, the chest, the belly. Then you arrive at the pelvis, another cave, right? You have two caves facing each other and a tunnel between them. So now imagine that in a situation of birth, when we know sounds are made during birth, right? So if the birthing person is humming or growling, it's traveling from the source of that growl or that hum, traveling down this tunnel into the pelvis, into the womb. But then it doesn't stop there. It goes down, it travels up and down into the earth and up into the cave that we're in, the dome that we're in. What happens is you then create a toroidal field where it goes into the cave, and because it's a curve, it goes through the curve, back into your body, out into the curve again, back into your body, and so on and so forth. So what we've just done is we've engaged our next membrane in enhancing the ability. We're basically sort of like creating a sonic massage for the pelvis and for the body that is going through ache and contractions. So that is just one scenario. But imagine if we build for our body's needs like that. That's just sound and the way it travels through our bodies, and what that can do for different scenarios. That's just one scenario. But you think about the healing capacity of that. That's why we have sound bowls, and we have like all of these things around sound. So many healing modalities developed around sound. A lot of them that are an almost outside-in method. But what if we build so that we can engage the architecture we come in with our skeletal form? Yeah.
Wow. You heard that. All right. Now we have a few minutes. Does anybody have a question, a suggestion, or any other brief engagement you want to have with the panelists?
All right. I can see. We'll just take those two. We'll take those two because of time. Mm-hmm. Please keep it to the question.
Thank you so much. This was an extremely exciting, engaging, informative, illuminating. I have many adjectives.
Wow.
I'll go on outside, but thank you so much. It was
Close.
really, I've learned so much, and I hope to learn even more. I'm very interested in the concept that you brought in terms of the barrier, what is seen now as a barrier between nature and our bodies, actually, that are all cyclical. And then we've brought in some stiff and rigid structures that are non-permeable membranes. Actually, when you said membranes, I went back to some torture in either primary or high school. I don't know which bio class was that. But thank you so much for that. And I wanted to ask in terms of pedagogy and learning, because that's my field a lot, and I feel because a lot of this information is there, a lot of it is there. So in terms of a lot of the storekeepers of our memories, the archives of our knowledge in a lot of the villages in our spaces, they still exist. It's disappearing slowly because we are not harvesting as much as we should, and I think we should do more. So I'm wondering to what extent you are both involved in any of that in terms of the work that you do, and also in terms of now passing it down. And I think that's really critical. I mean, in the last session I was listening to, we should have prototypes. Maybe if you have any sessions where you do these things with people, this kind of buildings or these kind of sessions, so that people get the sensory man, really a sense of what it would look like in real life to actually do this, right? People, I mean, when you talk about birth, I mean, at least the women who I think are the majority here, and the men, I mean, of course, you're here too. I mean, you're here too. But really, but thinking about those connections and why it's so critical for people to learn that they have knowledge. Because as Africans, because of our colonial past, this is very critical. We always think we need to go and be told by some Zungu somewhere. We always feel that knowledge has to come from outside. We never think it's coming. We actually are the repositories of our own knowledge. So for us to be able to be, to acknowledge that and for it to be really ignited by people who are at the forefront of this kind of things, like you are, I'm wondering whether you are engaging in any of those kind of projects. And lastly, I think it's lastly, yes, lastly, social relations in terms of building for and understanding social relations, because we always build with, I mean, it's so disturbing sometimes when you have to, in a house where you have to go to the toilet, and your father is in the next room or something, or, a mother-in-law has come and, someone is sleeping with someone in the next room. It's just, we don't build with those kind of social relations understanding. So
Sister, please allow them to answer.
Okay, no, just those two. I'm done. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you so much. There's been lots of learning. Yeah, my question is to Kaka. Yeah, I know quite a number of people here in the room. You could have allergies, different allergies. So in your research, have you looked into this and how the spaces that are designed with the senses in mind could change this? And in your design, if probably you've done projects, let's say clients having allergies, how have you been able to, in the design, put in strategies that have been able to avert this?
Hello. Maybe I can start with that in a very brief manner. He's raised a very important point that our bodies and our minds are not the same in terms of how we sense. That's why we have we are neurodiverse. I've not really dived into that topic, but I understand that what sometimes could be peaceful to someone could trigger someone else. So we have people who are hypersensitive and hypersensitive. People in psychology know that best than I do. And so the goal when you design, that's why when you're designing, when you talk about inclusive design, you're designing for people with ADHD, autism, people with cerebral palsy. How do you design for them? So the thing is, when you're designing for those people, you first need to understand what is their sensory profile. Is this a hypersensitive person? So a hypersensitive person, maybe a flat or a textured thing will trigger them more than someone else. So when you're designing for such person, you need to go back to having smooth things, having surfaces that are smooth. Not having a lot of echoes or sounds, because when it gets too loud, it triggers them. So how do you design with, say, like the microtile that is insulating? You design with such. So you come, when you're designing for a hypersensitive person, you calm down. When you're designing for a hypersensitive person who needs to be stimulated, you have more textures. You create spaces that their sounds get amplified, and that applies for all the other sensory stimuli. It comes to pedagogy. In the University of Nairobi, I'd say there's a lot of research that has been done in terms of the traditional ways of building. At the end of the 6 years in architecture study, usually you do a thesis where you do a thesis and a design project. So a lot of studies have been done. Most of them, it's not from a sensory perspective. It's from the climate, the traditional ways of building, and the vernacular architecture. So I'll say that is, the archives are there, so the future generations will be safe. In terms of how the indigenous, our forefathers built in a sensorial perspective, it's not really been done. It's rarely taught in architecture school. In fact, as I mentioned, when you're doing site analysis and you're talking about noises, you're talking about smells, you eliminate them, you don't design for them. So that has not been done, and that's why this is important, because now we can start talking about, we can start having those conversations, and the future is in documenting them and having, someone mentioned having the talk about biophilia design in being embedded into our curriculums. So that's one way to retain that. I can't remember the second question. Maybe I can give Kai to.
I won't speak much for the allergy question because I do not have that information. But I will speak for education and learning. I personally exited spaces of formal learning a while back because I realized they were not answering the questions I was asking. And so I went to the spaces that were. And so I've acquired a lot of my skills through apprenticeships, through finding the people who do the things I'm curious about and learning with them, working with them, and acquiring my knowledge and skills that way. And so I then, in any space that I sit as facilitator, teacher, and so on and so forth, I assume I embody archive, and I teach from that place, because I think the thing that has happened over time is that our archives have become the place of, the place for termites and things, and we now have to protect our papers because time and critters get them. What we've had long before papers and documents were living archives. I'm very interested in living archives. How do we build? How do we make music? How do we create art? How do we design our gardens? How do we, all of these ways that we live, how do we do all of them in a way with the understanding that they are going to be archives for the next generation? So yes, there is value in documentation, in having written form, but I'm more curious about that. And so I participate in all sorts of different workshops, all sorts of different things, and I like to make it so if I'm in the design phase of it, I like to make sure it's intergenerational one. That has been my biggest asset in any learning space. Make sure it's an intergenerational space, because then there's a flow of knowledge back and forth. And you can literally have sat in rooms and seen knowledge evolve in real time right now, just because it's being passed freely between generations in a way that we're no longer facilitating with our educational structures right now. So that's some of it, and we can keep in touch, and then we can figure out how we can continue to do that together. And then there's Fezi, you've already had her. She's doing some really cool work around that with children, and I know there's a couple of us in this group and also outside. Is just figuring out who's doing it and how to support it, because a lot of the times it's not going to look like what we already know, because what we already know is a lot of our educational systems are colonial. They were not built to serve us. They were not built to serve the systems that our ecosystem. So you have to go outside of what we're accustomed to seeing in terms of education to find the true archives of the kind of knowledge we're discussing on this panel, that we're discussing in this whole event. Yeah.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like us to put a pause on that. Please, let's appreciate the panelists one more time.
you.